Hey, how's it going? Keith Morgan here for TechTyro.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to texture a DVD disc for our fake game render. So just to start into this, we're going to go ahead and make our actual CD model, and this will be pretty simple. I'm going to go ahead and delete the default cube, and for those of you watching in the United States, we're going to be using the metric system, so I apologize for any confusion that may lead to. But for everyone else in the world, enjoy. So we're going to go ahead and go to the scene tab here, and we're going to change our units from none to metric, and that will let us enter in information in a very precise manner. I'm going to go ahead and hit N to bring up our property panel, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A to add a mesh circle. Now we're going to be adding multiple circles, but they all have to be the same vertex count, as we can see down here. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 32 for our default. Our first radius is going to be 18 millimeters. So if you go ahead and add 18 mm, you can see it shrinks right down. So we get that. And make sure your fill type is at nothing. And then we're going to go ahead and add another circle. And we're going to change the radius to 20 millimeters. So now you can see we have two. We're going to add another one, circle. And this time we're going to set the dimensions to 33 millimeters. Add another one. Change it to 38 millimeters. We're going to add a couple more here. This one is going to be 118 millimeters. And finally our last one, which will be at 120 millimeters. Alrighty. So you can find these dimensions online. I just looked at a Google search to grab these dimensions. They're probably within plus or minus 1 millimeter of the actual dimensions, so for render purposes it'll be very close and convincing, but they might not be exactly to what you would expect them to be, but like I said, close enough. So we're going to go ahead and select all of our circles here. Yeah, that's all of them, and we're going to hit Control J to join them, so now they're all one mesh. And now we're going to go ahead and one at a time we're going to select two of these loops. And then if we hit Control E to bring up the edge menu, we can choose, if I just bring it up here, you can see there's an option to bridge edge loops. That'll draw faces between those two. And so that way, we don't have to guess about scaling these when we're actually extruding from a single circle. We can make them all and then bridge the faces after the fact. So we'll just keep doing that. Alt-clicking to grab the entire face, or sorry, edge loop. Shift-Alt selecting the next one. Bridge edge loop, bridge edge loop, and bridge edge loop. Oop. There we are. Alrighty, so you can see this is pretty rough. So we'll go ahead and add a subsurf modifier. So we'll just go to the modifier panel here and add a subdivision surface. And let's just see what we got. Okay. So you can see that our inner circles moved around before and after as the smoothing took effect. And so just to fix that, we're just going to go ahead and select each of these inside edges. And we're going to turn up the mean crease up here on the property panel to 1. Sorry, we'll just select the edge loops as opposed to all of these edges. Put the mean crease up to 1, and that'll just make sure that they stay in place when they're smoothed. So we have that now. So now we can go ahead and actually extrude this puppy down. So we're just going to select everything, hit E, and we'll just move it down a bit. It's going to estimate about 1 to 2 millimeters. Yeah, that should be about good. So we have that. Let's go to orthographic so we don't get the clipping in our way. And you can kind of see that it's getting folded over here with the subsurf. So if you didn't want that to be so extreme, you could go ahead and put a couple retaining edges here on the side. And now you can see we've got this nice beveling as opposed to it just melting away on the edge. And we'll give the smooth shading. There we are. So we have this lovely disc. And I'm just going to go ahead and crease the inside edges here so that it's perfectly straight. Yeah. And we might put in a retaining edge or two in there as well, just to tighten up that edge. Okay. And also make the smoothing a little more consistent over the surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and model some of these finer details in here. So you have the, I suppose, this will be the top surface, so this will have our texture on it. So we won't worry about putting any sorts of grooves or anything into that, but the bottom you should see. And there is a slight amount of inconsistency in the surface, so these will have grooves in them. So we can go ahead and model these in if we want. So we'll just take two edge loops here. We'll just scale one close to the other. Actually, here we'll turn off the editing cage for edit mode. And if we just scale it out, and we go ahead and mean crease both of those so those don't move around on us, and then we add an edge loop between them, and we move that one down on the Z-axis, or I guess up towards the top. We get something that looks a little bit like that. And then just to, yeah, not bad. So that'll be in the surface of the plastic. And then, yeah, that looks pretty good. So now I guess we can go about assigning materials to these different areas. So if you've ever looked at a CD, you can see that there's metallic surface, a see-through plastic surface, the label obviously. The one challenge you might think in your head is, how am I going to make the shiny surface on the bottom have that rainbow effect? We actually have a bit of a cheat for it. It's not a perfect replica of it, but it is procedural, so you won't have to worry about it being too straining on your mind to work out. So we can go about doing that. So first things first, we'll make that the main material. So we'll switch over to cycles, use nodes, and we'll call this disk bottom. And then we'll add another material for the label, another material for the clear plastic, and one more material for the metal foil. So those will be our main materials. So we'll go ahead and we'll just pick arbitrary colors for these just so we can differentiate these. So we'll make the disk color blue, and we can actually assign this now. If we go ahead and look, we can select all of these faces here. We'll leave the outside edge for a metal, because they don't print right to the edge. They do have a bleed. So we'll have these faces here. That will be the label, so we'll assign that. So now you can see we have a label. Clear plastic will be all of this inner stuff. And then the same on the bottom. And that goes right till there. So that'll be clear plastic. Assign that. We'll give that a white color in the viewport. Then we have our metal foil. We'll select that. And then this edge. All of these side edges. And that. We'll call that metal foil. Drop it down a bit so you can differentiate it. So we have that. And that should work out pretty well for us. So now we can go ahead building these materials with the node editor, and this will actually be pretty simple. I'm just going to go ahead and change our timeline to a node editor. Also going to go ahead and save. We'll click the button here for material use, and we'll start with the disk bottom so you can actually see how this is going to work out. So like I said, this isn't a perfect replacement for the way the bottom of the disk refracts the light and disperses it into the rainbow, but it fakes it quite well, and you know, for a pinch it's quite simple, so we will be going ahead and using that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete the diffuse node we have here, and I'm going to swap it out for an isotropic shader. We're just going to feed that into the surface, and switch to GPU here, go to rendered viewport, and if I go ahead and clear the rotation on our point lamp with Alt-G, it'll move it to the center here, and I'll move it down, and these nodes, I'll drop its strength down to like 1, or yeah, even less than that. You can kind of see what we're getting here. So you can see that even with like the basic anisotropic shading, you get the banding of light as it disperses, but we want to make it a little bit more extreme. And actually here, I'm gonna move our point lamp around just so we can see what we're doing a bit better. There we are. So the shallower the angle is to the surface, the narrower these will get, and if you're right above it, they'll get pretty spread out, which is pretty realistic if you look at an actual disc. Let's go to perspective. Yeah. So you can see how that attenuates the width of those bands as you get shallower. Anyways, so to get the color in here, we're going to go ahead and add a converter color ramp. And if we feed the color ramp into the anisotropic shader, we can color this, and we're going to go ahead and make a rainbow here. So for black, we'll just replace that with red, and get that. And we just keep adding nodes, or I suppose values here, and we replace them with the colors of the rainbow. So here at the end we'll have purple, or magenta, I suppose, somewhere in there. You can put whatever colors you want in for yours if you want to change what colors show up. Green, yeah. Add another one in there, green. Add one more in there, make that yellow. That's 100% green red. Alright, so we get a range that starts looking something like that. But you can see here that it's only displaying one color at a time, and that's because the factor is what chooses that. So at a maximum of 1, we get 100% violet, and at a minimum of 0, we get all the red, because this color spectrum here runs from 0 to 1. So to get it to actually display how we want it to display, we're going to go ahead and use a handy little feature built into the anisotropic shading and extrapolation, I suppose. It uses its own tangent, but if we feed in another tangent in the color ramp, you can see that, oh, look at that. We get the color spectrum showing up in different places here. But you're noticing a problem here. Half of it's red, and we don't even get to the violet. So what that tells us is that the tangent runs from a negative 0.5 value, which would be red continuously in that direction onwards, to about a 0.5. So if it's running from a negative 0.5 to 0.5, we want it to remap those values from 0 to 1. So to do that, we'll go to converter, add a math node, and we'll just add 0.5, and now you can see we get all our colors back. And so now when we orbit around here, you can see that our highlights inherit those colors of the disk. That's looking pretty good. But you're probably thinking, oh, hey, well, we don't want all this junk, you know, all these colors here. And yeah, you're right, you probably don't. Let's see, put our roughness down to 0.1. So to fix that, we'll get a mix shader, And we'll mix in a glossy shader to bring back some of the sheen in the surface, as well as give a neutral color for most of the disc. So we get something like that. We put the roughness of the glossy shader down to something really, really low, like a 0.01, something that doesn't even really make that much of a difference. So you can't really see the effect here. So we'll go ahead and load up an environment map. So we'll go to the World tab, click Use Nodes. Under Color here, we'll click this little tab, choose Environment Texture. Then we'll go and open one. Alright, so now if we go to Perspective, you can see what we got here. So you still get a bit of the rainbow no matter what angle you're looking at, but it's not as intense. So that's where it kind of comes in handy. But what you can also do here is just, tone down the rainbow a bit just by putting in more of the glossy shader as opposed to the anisotropic shader. And so, that was looking pretty good. If you want your reflections to be a little more sharp, you just drop your roughness even lower, 0.01, something that doesn't even make sense. Yeah, we'll leave it at 0.01 for now, just because it makes your environment map not look so low res. But we'll save. And now we will go ahead and do the clear plastic. So this one's a fairly simple material as well. We're just going to change the diffuse texture the diffuse shader to a glass shader. And if you look up the IOR value for the plastic used on these things, it's about a 0.55, which is close to the IOR of actual glass. You can see that looks pretty good. If you turn up the luminosity of the color here from that 80% gray to a pure white, it'll be more see-through. If you make it black, it'll be more opaque and black. But the whiter it is, the more see-through it'll be. And yeah, so that looks pretty good, and you can see that refracting quite nicely. If you want the refraction to be closer to that groove, if you just go into edit mode and let's see here, where are we? Just add in a couple edge loops here to tighten that edge up, and spread out the shading a little bit closer. You can see that that's nice and close to the surface now. Yeah, so quite nice. And then we will do the metal foil next, and this one is also fairly straightforward. We'll change the diffuse from to a glossy shader, and so we get this perfect chrome, but that's not how that is. And it's also an well, it's similar to the bottom disc texture, but this is just simplifying it. It's very slightly yellow, just slightly from the disc media. So you just tinge it slightly yellow in the panel here, and we'll put the roughness up to a 0.1, just so it's not so chromy. And yeah, looks pretty good. If you want it to still be metallic like that, but not, yeah, actually I'm going to put the roughness down a bit, 0.05, something. Sure, okay, good. So we get that. I'm just going to go ahead and delete the point lamp, just because it's making some weird artifacts on the bottom here, for now. So we get that. And now our last step is to texture the actual label. So to do this, we'll have to unwrap it. That'll be really easy, it being a circle, and us using a square texture. So I'll just drag out another panel here, hit ZZ to go to solid view, hit 7 to go to top, and if we click our label here, let's tab into edit mode. If we, with our label here selected, we just hit select, we'll be able to select all those faces there. And then if we go and open up a UV image editor, and we open up our actual texture, we have this. And then if we just over here hit U, project from view bounds, that'll put it exactly where it needs to be. And let's just scale it and move it to fit where we need it to fit, just so that our title's fitting on the actual surface of the disc. Somewhere in there. And you could always redesign your picture if you wanted to. so that it better fits the disk, and actually export the UV layout so you can redesign it and move things around. I'm just going to use the texture we had from the case, but that should work. So these have a slight matte finish. They're still slightly glossy, the label, but so we're going to still mix in a bit of a glossy shader. So we'll take a mix shader, mix in glossy, but we'll leave the roughness quite high. And then if we put in a texture, image texture, and a input texture coordinate, feed that into the vector for UV, feed the color of the image texture into the color of the diffuse, load up our image, and go to rendered. Now you can see that we have our lovely disk, but we've mixed in too much of the glossy shader, and actually we could probably put the roughness down to 0.1. Yeah, that looks good. If we put the factor to like 0.1, yeah, something like that. Get something that looks like that. So if we just orbit around here, let's rotate it, duplicate it, just so you can get a sense of how this thing's looking. Something. Yeah, you can see it's reflecting it quite nicely. So we're just going to go ahead and add a camera here, or move our camera to that position. Click lock camera to view, just so we can, frame it up kind of cool, and get a sense of what we're looking at. And rotate this one back. And now to get the rainbow to show up, you'll actually need a light source. Right now our scene's just lighting it, which isn't giving it enough of a hotspot to make the refractions like that. Yeah, let's hit the dead. Come out here. What did we add? Spotlight. Sorry, point lamp. Move it up somewhere, and that should, in theory, give us our reflections. And we'll just move it around so it's not blinding our scene. And we'll put the strength down to like a 20. Yeah, it's even too much. 5, 3. Move it down. Yeah. Yeah, you can always punch around with it. If you want your disc to be reflecting, if you just want to quickly change it in a pinch, go to your material. You just hit this F on the color ramp. It'll flip it so you get the different colors just real quickly. Instead of having to rotate your disc, you can just flip it. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. Let's move the point lamp up. Sorry, we'll reduce the size maybe to like 1 centimeter. Yeah, there you go. So you get those nice sharp refractions in there. You can see we're getting a little bit of noise with that blurring out. So that's just one of the give and takes you'll have to take with blurring out your textures and having highlights like that. Yeah, we probably get away with it by moving our point lamp a bit more. Yeah, something. Yeah. It'll probably give you a bit of trouble here and there. So you'll have to make some sacrifices on some things and just jack up your render settings and stuff like that. If you want your refractions here to be spread out more, you just increase the size of your point lamp. Yeah, let's see what 2 centimeters is. Yeah, something. Looks good. If you had multiple point lamps, you'll get multiple refractions. So let's just move that out. Yeah, so you can kind of paint your scene with how you want your reflections and refractions to be, just by manually putting in the light sources. So I'm just going to go ahead and save, and we'll just give this some render settings. 56 by 256. Sampling, put our render up to 250. Probably won't be enough to get rid of most of the noise, but it'll get rid of enough for our devices. Make it a square. Zoom in, reposition. Light paths, reduce. or sorry, if we filter the glossy, it'll reduce some of the noise and the reflections there, but it'll also make it less accurate. If you hover over it, it'll tell you that. So you know, use it wisely if you want to have any of that. You can always reduce the bounces here, or use the preset for limited global illumination, and that'll cut the bounces down to the bare minimum. You know, it'll hopefully cut down on the noise for you. If we put our film to transparent, we can get just the discs, and we'll hit F12 and see what we get. So there you can see we have our discs, and they look quite nice. You can see we're getting, you know, a little bit of heavy noise on this part, and you can always tone that down just by toning down the strength of your lamps, just so that the samples can actually render the strength a little bit more accurately. So we can just grab that second spot lamp, turn the strength down to 1 maybe. Yeah, 0.05. Yeah, just enough to make it visible. And try that. And it's too close to the disc, so let's move that back. Try that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So, like I said, you can always increase your samples, just so you can get rid of some of the noise left on the disc here. Yeah, for just playing around for a second, you know, you can get quite nice effect. And I hope this also taught you how to make a pretty realistic looking CD disc for your own renders. So in the last part of this tutorial, we'll place the disc and the case together and do a final render. So until then, this is Keith Morgan for Tech Tarot, signing off.